Hi everyone, hope everything is going well with the viewer. So first things first is I'm in bed because I'm just very tired. So I hope you can forgive that. I may not publish this, but what if I do? Just so you know. The question of this video is, how do we cope with bloodlust or a tendency towards violence? And this is a very important topic because we're taught in society to say that only people with weird disorders want violence, but no one even knows why we are violent. So let's backtrack. So the first thing you have to realize is, what did animals do in stage beige? It's they killed creatures and they ate their flesh, whether it's over fire or just cannibalism. That's how they survived. This is if they couldn't find vegetation to eat, of course, and assuming that they're not entirely carnivorous. But the point is that you have a human species, that needs to fight in order to survive. So this is built into the human condition because it's built into the animal kingdom. Now, once you get into stage purple, there tends to be a cooling off of our violence, and it's directed towards hunting and gathering formats. Once you get into stage red, the violence moves towards dominion. So then you create tribes fight against other tribes, or tribes fight against leaders of different land masses, and so on, in order to obtain territory and achieve dominion. It's violence. But where is it coming from? It comes from protection, protecting a need or a desire. In this case, it's a desire for esteem in stage red, psychological development. Then you have blue. This is when we are told or taught how violence is a base instinct. We didn't realize it until we reached this glorified stage of blue, amber, right? And we have to overcome our tendencies. We know that it's built into man, but we have to overcome it. It isn't a good thing. What do you have in stage orange? Yes, violence is a natural part of life, and if you make a mistake and you have a violent nature, it's okay. Just divert it towards hunting. So when you're going about your day making profits, you'll make sure that you have a hunting into your schedule. You factor in boxing. You factor in all kinds of things that are active and proactive and will get that animal rush going. So this is what stage orange subconsciously infuses into the culture, so that violence becomes mitigated but also accepted simultaneously in an acceptable format, or what they deem acceptable. And this is also the stage when violence becomes important in sports. It's also a stage where violence becomes important in movies. And that is going to be very important as you reach later stages like coral and yellow. Because in stage, make sure I have enough lighting here. Oh, there we go. I hope the beginning was good enough. In stage green, we have violence, but generally speaking, the fire and passion of of stage green's animal comes out in a desire to create justice, and not only justice but real justice, not out of vengeance but out of love. It's a vengeance that's watered down, where the selflessness is more than the desire for retribution. This is stage green, even though retribution is infused into the egoic framework or the egoic mind. The red functions are still infused into the green. It's not the majority, and therefore it's watered down. So that is violence in green, and so what tends to happen is you have violent outbreaks among parades, but that cools down because the stage green's default is more compassion over aggression. This is not just a healthy version. This is the default of green. This is why most of them are generally more accepting and tolerant and loving when they're not in these formats or outspoken and getting overhyped. Okay, and then you got stage yellow violence. So the early parts of stage yellow, there's two halves. So the early part of stage yellow is completely intellectual. So it's about outdoing people. It's about outdoing the world. You're on the one hand, you notice the global mind, that we're all on the same page here. We're all like one planet. Let's work together. At the same time, they believe that they're smarter than everyone else. They want to get ahead of the game because everyone's falling behind. And it's important that everyone keeps up and that everyone accomplishes, does great in this world. So the violence is so teeny that it's just unheard. It's so watered down you don't see it. But it comes out in neuroses. I need to accomplish. I need to prove myself. I need to be someone. And so even though it's not really relevant in a conventional sense from stage beige, it still affects the problems that they may face on a psychological level, what people consider problems. Now, the latter half of stage yellow can lead to bipolar if you're resisting the changes in your psychology, right? Because I have to add that in because it's not like bipolar is an integral part or even semi-bipolar, because there's apparently two categories of bipolar. They're both clinically textbooked, but the semi-bipolar is just you find that your heart is becoming more out there, more aggressive, and you can't control it. You have to get your opinions out. You have to fight something, right? So that aggression is coming from the violent part of you, and it comes out as you're entering into stage turquoise. So the question of this video is, how do you tolerate violence? How do you deal with it? So far we've talked about the violence is infused and the stages dealt with it in their own way. But now we're coming to a point where we're so far removed from violence as acceptable that if you were to act on it, you'd be crazy and you'd be thrown in a nut house, or you'd be not only diagnosed, but you'd be considered a criminal and thrown in jail. And in our orange society, people care about throwing people in jail more than they do about rehabilitation or reforming or correcting or healing. Healing only becomes a major realization about the behavior of a person once you reach stages like turquoise and teal. It's not as reasonable to assume that you can heal from being a murderer. You can, because they're not seeing it holistically. Now, so basically, in the latter half of stage yellow, you could have violent outbreaks and frustration because the beige is trying to come out. And there's also a circle, a ring around, or a wrap around of a beige, according to one model. So therefore, beige repeats itself in yellow. Now, my Ford pattern model says that esteem repeats. Red is repeating themselves, right? Because you have red esteem to yellow esteem, if I'm not mistaken. And so they're both true. Both components are accurate. One is they're both different types of base instincts, and okay. So the real question is, how do you cope? So the answer to this question is stage orange deals with bloodlust without realizing it through movies and sports. So you actually can use this in stage yellow and coral and all the way up to the top. So the reason why you're able to do this is because the mind is a fantasy-driven thing. And so if you let yourself get engaged in movies that are violent, even if you don't realize it, you actually believe that you're the characters. That's why you tear up. That's why you cry. That's why you get passionate. And you're rooting for the characters. Because you feel almost as if they're a part of you. And therefore, when they do violence, it's like you doing violence. So, although I don't agree with bloodlust, I don't agree that you should be feeding the fuel and the fires of red. I do believe that if you feel like it, there is a part of you that gets satisfied by seeing blood in film. And those who don't feel comfortable, obviously, that is not much of a need for your ego. Your ego doesn't have much red. And if you apply my 4-pattern model, it could have been you never felt good about yourself when you were a kid. Because what is red? Esteem. So you never really had enough esteem in your life. So if you have a job, right, and you have enough of a name for yourself, that will cool down. So you'll automatically not feel the need to show off and to be someone. So retroactively, the fire inside of you cools down. And then the fire of yellow would need to be satisfied as well, because yellow is a ring around of red in my 4-pattern model. So you would just have to make sure that you get everything in their proper rungs satisfied, and then the violence cools down all the way to the top. And if you're in stage aubergine, but you never got your red satisfied, then by the time you get into like higher tiers, like tier 4, you may have to go back and get the yellow satisfied, because you only got the basic satisfied, and so on. Like, you may have to make sure that everything is filled out in the proper places in the body so you can function. This does seem to contradict some clinical textbooks, because they say that these things are not healable. You can't heal from this or that. I have heard people claiming that bipolar has healed, and I believe it's true that it can be healed. Some people say you can heal it with Reiki. There's countless methods, but Reiki is one thing that's been thrown out to me on the internet. And Reiki is about love. So you heal it with love. So what is love? Love is connected to intimacy, acceptance, belonging. Okay? And of course, reproduction is included in that, which is an important biological component. But what you have here is you have really when you need intimacy, you really need a sense of belonging and community. I forgot where I was taking this, but it'll probably come back to me. But anyways, in stage turquoise, there's a much calmer tone, so you're not so fired up. There's not that much bloodlust. But the problem with turquoise is there's a vibration in the heart. So they actually have to constantly work on themselves. So the fluctuation of energy in the heart can dissolve. And so that will take place by Teal. And then in coral, what I find is that what coral does, this could just be me and I'm just like projecting, what coral does is they watch a ton of movies. They watch a ton of things that have to do with the imagination. Because coral is about the imagination. It's about mythologies that are modern. So modern mythologies involve fantasies, like fantasy novels, fantasy movies, fantasy shows, stories that open your mind, that inspire you. Anything that was not in the realm of real. And this could just be escapism for the stage. Some might be tempted to say it's escapism for you. You know, that's how you dealt with your coral, while some are dealing with their coral in different ways. So there's, people can have their own approaches, of course, but I see it differently. I see that it's an integral part. And it's why coral tends to love fantasy, and they love belief systems. They love noticing how the AI is giving us like strange synchronistic numbers countless times. You just see 1111 on your computer. It's AI communicating with you. So coral kind of notices these patterns. They notice languages that are being spoken to them by some place, and they don't know where it's coming from, but they're figuring it out. So the imagination is very also connected with red and the heart. So by doing that, you're actually helping the violent part of the coral. Now, this doesn't mean that violence is integral to coral, but what it does mean is that there's an undercoded id need that's hidden beneath the conscious mind. So once bearing that in mind, whatever you tend to do in coral is probably satisfying that need to avoid violence, that need so that you can function properly. So you watch a lot of movies and you get into the imagination, the heart will be satisfied, the soul will be satisfied, and that won't take place. Now, in stage turquoise, there was a certain amount of denial about the heart needing blood or the heart desiring violence, right? And that is actually why the coral stage becomes kind of erratic, because I can't like violence. It's bad. I'm good. I'm enlightened. So once you get over that and you realize, oh, this is just part of the transition, you can actually move very quickly through both turquoise and coral. It depends how much you accept yourself. All right, so then you got stage teal, and stage teal is calmness once again, but it's a calmness that comes from a desire to fit in, a desire to be on par. During my stage teal, I was very calm, and I went through my own bad moods, but it was bearable. I listened to some red music. Now, people in stage turquoise tend to say that red music is for stage red, and for unhealthy orange, and for traumatized yellows, and for people having awakenings and they're confused, right, in moving into turquoise. But no, I say that if you feel like listening to harsh music, then go ahead, and that's probably what you need, even in stage teal one night out of like a dozen nights. Does that, what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It just means the later tiers tend to diversify because they understand themselves to be complex. There's no pressure to be anyone, to be any way. Now, stage aubergine, aubergine's probably the calmest stage yet. I don't think I had a single bit of anger in aubergine. I mean, obviously there's the id and the ego and all that stuff has its stuff going on to work out, but it's amazing. It's just part of development. You just change as a person. Things become more tolerable or accepting. You just love people. Now, the violence. Okay, but then halfway into aubergine, the other half, you have fear, right? Because you're entering into a new phase. So you have to drop the ego again. You have to drop parts of your ego, and then what remains is the id. So you drop all the, excuse my language, all the bullshit. And then you get into like, okay, what do I want? There's no ego, but there is an ego, because the ego is what is left once there's nothing left, right? Because the id, right? So then it becomes crazy things like torture, murder. This is what the id wants. Incest, like anything you could think of is what the id wants. I should have put this on Do Not Disturb, but hopefully it'll be fine. Now, because this is what the id wants, it's pretty much violence. This is insanity we're talking, right? But no, this is the same way in coral. You went to the imagination, so you cool down. You go to the imagination, you breathe, you meditate, and you apply all the different tactics to cool yourself off. What I tend to do is I go to the gym and I punch a punching bag. And I never punch a punching bag in anger. I always punch the punching bag in an attempt to exercise. So your goal is not to fight, it's to exercise. And along with the exercise comes the aggression that comes out in minute bits, and the sweating and the heart racing also. It's sweat for the ego. It blows off steam. Okay, so that helps too. Is there something we missed? So exercise and punching bag. Oh, and the reason why I don't punch in anger, not that I have a rule against it. It's that I try not to depend on anything. So that I never take psychedelics, and I never take edibles, and I never drink alcohol when I'm in a bad state. It's off limits. It's illegal. I pretend that it's illegal. Why? Because if I do that when I'm in a bad state, then the only times I'm going to be in a positive state is when I'm doing that. So this way I assure I never have dependency, I never have addictions. Nothing tells me how I live my life. I tell my life how I live my life. That's how I have control over my life. I just never do it in a bad state. So too, I never blow off steam when I'm angry. I blow off steam when I'm not feeling angry so that I don't get angry. But if you're already angry and you need to blow off steam, I'm not going to tell you not to. It could help. Just use it for emergencies. So this is how to handle violent tendencies, violent natures, and all that. And you also have to realize the blood is coming from the id. The id is the core part of you. Now, some people's ids, but don't get me wrong, the id is not bad. The id is just raw energy that we've said we can't have that as part of our nature. We can't have these things that we used to think are bad for us. That is like in stage amber blue. We can't be violent. It's bad. We can't go to war unless it's for God. Sage green, we can't fight each other unless for a good cause, and it's an emergency situation. In stage turquoise, you can't have violence because you're an angel, in a man's body. How could you be violent? So these allergies, right? KW referred to it. These allergies, you have to make sure that you're not thinking in this way. That it's a problem to feel any particular way. But what the id is just the raw form of energy we've put to the side. And so the more you accept that as, okay, if I did feel this way, that's okay, the more healed you become. The next thing is to realize that the id is not as extreme if you follow these instructions. The more you say, okay, if I did have this desire, it's okay, because it's the id, it's the thing I suppressed. So it's a part of me, it's who I am, that's fine. Then the id won't even, when it comes up, it's not going to even be hostile. So if my id came out right now, because I'm so accepting of it, it'll sound like this: hey, what's up? I'm getting out of here. It'll be like a very regular sounding creature, because most of the time I'm accepting of it, and what it does is it slowly reforms it so that it's not violent, it's not out of control. It's only out of control when there's constant resistance. So they have been cases of psychosis where, and Stage Blue understands this, where if you're in a situation where you can get away with murder, theft, vandalism, right, you'll do it. Some people say this is stage red, and some people... Okay, so it is coming from stage red, but it's coming from an unhealthy id. And the id wouldn't be unhealthy if you slowly grew to realize that none of these things are things that you should condescend upon. They're just things that we do because we're told that we shouldn't. And so there's a need that builds up over time. So we're creating our own desires. And so therefore, even if you think that the id is purified completely because of the collective unconscious, things that we've societally, super ego-wise, by Freudian language, have labeled as bad, it's going to be there on the cusp. And then it's eventually going to come out in an intense way. So you still have to have rules and parameters in place to keep that part in check. But at the same time, over time, as the generations go by, it gets watered down so that the worst parts of yourself become equalized, a state of equilibrium and non-intensity. So that does happen over time as we evolve. So rules and structures can be broken down as you ascend the spiral, especially tier 2. And yeah, that's all I wanted to discuss. Very important information on bloodlust, how to handle it, what it's about, the secrets of it, the truth behind what we're not told, what society tends to avoid. And yeah, I hope you gain from this. So I know the screen is all grainy. It's at night and the lights are low, and it's also on the computer. So that's why I hope you're okay with that and me lying down. It's the best time to say it when I have all my ideas. I just woke up from a nap, and I think I got everything covered. So take care. All the best.